Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into, well, a truly fascinating rabbit hole. It was sparked by a tweet that's been doing the rounds online, and it claims that Chat GPT has discovered something genuinely incredible, an anti-gravity effect related to spinning Mercury. Now you might be thinking, wait, AI inventing anti-gravity, that sounds like pure science fiction. And honestly, you'd be right to be curious, very curious. So our mission today is to unpack this pretty extraordinary claim. We'll explore the true capabilities and, crucially, the limitations of artificial intelligence. And then we'll take a really deep look at the long, intriguing history of Mercury and its strange properties. We even have a riveting firsthand account of some pretty wild experiments later on. It's going to be quite the journey for you, the learner.
It really is. And what's truly fascinating here is how you have these multiple, seemingly separate threads. You've got cutting-edge AI, fundamental physics principles, even a bit of historical science. And they all kind of converge to create this captivating mystery that, yeah, it really makes you think. It's just a perfect example of how information, especially now, spreads so fast and how absolutely crucial it is for us to understand, the origins and the very nature of that information.
Okay, let's unpack this tweet then, because that's really where our deep dive kicks off. Our source points to a specific tweet where a user is, quote, convinced that ChatGPT has come up with this anti-gravity thing, which is spinning Mercury. But interestingly, our source retweeted it for a very different reason than you might initially think.
Exactly. That's key. The source clarifies they retweeted it not because they think ChatGPT invented it, but because they genuinely believe there is something real, something profound to the whole idea of spinning Mercury. And this immediately raises a really important question for all of us, doesn't it? Can large language models like ChatGPT actually be creative? Can they discover brand new scientific principles that no human has ever thought of before?
It really seems like most people, and our source notes this too, they instantly jump to that conclusion. They see the label artificial intelligence and think, wow, it can create something totally new. It's such a powerful label.
And that's precisely where, a fundamental misunderstanding of how these systems truly operate often comes in. These programs, for the most part, they function in a deterministic way. They're essentially making connections, forming linkages between existing data points, basically between words in these huge databases they're trained on. All they can actually do is link words up. They don't possess any true intelligence in the human sense, no inherent understanding, no consciousness. They're basically a highly sophisticated search engine, retrieving sequences of words, structuring them into sentences using natural language processing. Think of them maybe as incredibly advanced pattern matchers, not really thinkers or innovators.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, it's not actually discovering anything new. It's just retrieving and maybe repackaging existing information that it was trained on.
Precisely. That's it. The whole idea of spinning Mercury having unusual effects, maybe even anti-gravity effects, that's actually been out there in the public domain, written about since at least the 1950s, possibly even the 1960s. There's work by individuals like Townsend Brown that's been discussed. So ChatGPT isn't generating a novel concept here. It's simply providing linkages, connecting the dots to something that's already been written about regarding anti-gravity. It's finding patterns in data that already exists.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting and kind of highlights the limitations you're talking about. That inability of AI to truly discern fact from fiction. Our source gives this wild, almost funny example.
Okay, yeah, this is a great illustration. Imagine if ChatGPT were current and could learn new material in real time, which, importantly, it isn't, right? Its knowledge was essentially capped off back in, October 2021? But let's just run with this as a thought experiment. Our source imagines a fictional scenario. You write a children's book. And in this book, you describe this very specific, elaborate peanut butter and marshmallow cream sandwich on whole wheat bread. It's sealed in a 1/4-inch layer of cream cheese, dusted with powdered sugar, and then, magically, it levitates. The book even explicitly says if you put a bunch of these in a cage in your car will float. Pure fiction.
Okay, I'm with you. So if ChatGPT, this hypothetical real-time learning version, read this book, how would it process that? Would it flag it as obviously impossible fiction like we instantly would?
Correct. It wouldn't. It would simply pick up the linkages between the words. So if you then asked it about recent anti-gravity discoveries, and if this fictional book had gained enough, let's call it word power, meaning a high volume of related mentions or just a strong algorithmic weighting in its training data, ChatGPT might actually report this fictional levitating sandwich as a top solution for anti-gravity.
Wow.
Yeah. Why? Because it doesn't analyze the content critically, it doesn't think about physical impossibility, it just links words. It connects levitating sandwich to anti-gravity. It perfectly highlights how easily AI can inadvertently link concepts, even completely spurious ones, if the word associations in its data are strong enough. It's really a testament to the power of human discernment, something we often take for granted.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So if ChatGPT isn't inventing this and it's just pulling from existing info, where did the idea of spinning Mercury and unusual properties originally come from? This concept clearly has a much deeper, more intriguing history that predates our current AI hype.
Indeed, it does. We can trace serious interest in Mercury's unique characteristics back quite a way, at least to Nikola Tesla. He conducted some of his early experiments around 1898. Now, even back then, Mercury was known for being unstable and having significant health risks, obviously. But Tesla was exploring its potential uses, for instance, as a bearing surface, using just a tiny droplet. He was really pushing the boundaries, looking for practical applications.
Right, he was trying to solve a specific problem they had back then with lead bearings, which sounds pretty archaic now. What did he actually find in those early experiments, particularly related to AC current?
Well, he was considering using something called a central pivot oscillating commutator for AC current. Now, for you listening, an oscillating commutator is basically a device for rapidly switching the current direction in an AC system, to ensure smooth power. Tesla envisioned this central pivot resting in a small pool of mercury, and it was in these experiments he discovered, and I'm quoting loosely here, interesting effects that were caused by the electrical current within his device. These effects were significant enough that they ultimately led him to abandon using mercury for that specific application.
Yeah.
So even back in the late 19th century, a mind like Tesla's observed something unusual, something compelling, when mercury interacted with electricity, enough to change his design path.
So even way back then, he saw something odd with mercury and electricity. What else do we know about Mercury's specific properties that make it so unique, so fascinating to researchers?
Our source points out that mercury is inherently unstable in the presence of an electric fluid or electric field, meaning it reacts, sometimes unpredictably, when electricity is applied. But conversely, it's described as rigid in the presence of a permanent magnet field and will always take the opposing polarity. And fascinatingly, it acts as a kind of reflective surface in terms of magnetism.
Reflective. That's strange.
Very strange. These are really peculiar, distinct characteristics. They set it apart from most other elements and, well, make it fertile ground for unconventional research, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And this leads us to another key figure mentioned in our source material, someone who took these observations perhaps even further, suggesting even more profound interactions. Kozyrev, or Kozyrev, as our source pronounced it.
Yes, Kozyrev, a fascinating figure in Russian science. He determined that mercury possesses properties that aren't immediately apparent through, let's say, conventional physics. And in his opinion, these properties extended to interacting with the active qualities of time.
Okay, active qualities of time. That sounds profound. What does that actually mean?
Well, it's not about time just as a linear progression, like seconds ticking by. Kozyrev saw time as something more dynamic, almost like a force, a fundamental fabric of reality that materials could influence or be influenced by. He believed certain materials, and mercury was key among them, could potentially absorb or release this time energy, as some interpret it. Now, our source is in strong agreement with this perspective, and importantly, not just because Kozyrev said it, they state quite clearly that they've personally replicated Kozyrev's experiments and conducted their own original work. And this work led them to similar conclusions about Mercury's strange interactions with what they perceive as fundamental aspects of reality beyond just electromagnetism.
Okay, and this is where we get a truly unique insight, isn't it? Directly from one of our sources, they describe their own experimental work with Mercury, work which, as they put it, caused strange things to occur. Echoing Kozyrev, echoing Tesla, maybe.
That's right. Our source obtained 10 grams of mercury sealed in a small glass capsule. It was about an inch high, maybe a third to 40% of an inch wide. And this wasn't just, a classroom demonstration thing. It was for serious scientific exploration, trying to test these very properties.
And then they got incredibly creative, designing a very specific electrical field around this capsule using microwire.
Precisely. Very intricate work. They wrapped microwire around the capsule, starting right at the midpoint, the equator. One half of the capsule was wrapped clockwise, the other half wrapped in the opposing direction, counterclockwise. And they did 3 layers of these wraps on each half. This carefully created 4 termination points, allowing them to run 2 distinct electrical circuits. The whole setup was designed to create these opposing magnetic or electric fields right within the capsule, acting on the mercury.
And how did they power this? This quite intricate setup. It sounds like something from an old hi-fi movie prop department.
Right. They used a handheld, hand-cranked DC electric generator, one that could drive 2 separate circuits. They connected the wires, and they said initially they were just fussing around, not expecting anything to occur. It sounds like it was a moment of pure scientific curiosity. Just, let's see what happens when we introduce these fields to the mercury.
But something definitely did occur.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it happened pretty fast and dramatically. What was the initial reaction inside the capsule?
Yes. Almost immediately upon cranking the generator, the mercury inside began to, quote, oscillate and wobble and shake, a clear, violent response to the electric field. Then, as they put it, they really cranked it, pushing the generator hard, putting maximum power in. The mercury actually started spinning in opposite directions at each end of the capsule.
Whoa.
Yeah. It was, as they described, attempting to split into 2 columns or 2 spheres. It was bulging out dramatically at the ends and almost separating completely in the middle, right at the equator of the capsule, where apparently there was no spin at all, just this intense division.
That sounds incredibly dramatic.
Yeah.
Like the mercury itself was under immense stress, fighting itself almost within the glass. What happened next after this intense internal struggle and swirling?
Well, the source describes a distinct kwump noise. They weren't sure if it was an explosion or an implosion, but the result was the little glass capsule itself shattered into tiny little fragments everywhere. Luckily, they were doing this inside a plastic container as a safety shield. The mercury was apparently just everywhere. It required a really painstaking cleanup, using a magnet, carefully pushing it off surfaces.
Wow. So the experiment had a very decisive and unexpected end.
Extremely decisive. The source even wonders if that confused electric field right at the equator, where the opposing windings overlapped, might have played a key role.
Yeah.
Maybe creating a point of maximum stress, maximum interaction that led to the shattering.
Okay, so after such a dramatic and frankly kind of explosive outcome, what did the source conclude from this? Was it anti-gravity in their view, or was it something else entirely going on, something that maybe defies our conventional explanations?
Well, the experiment certainly demonstrated some powerful, localized forces at play. Forces far beyond what you might conventionally expect. It strongly suggested an intense interaction between the mercury and those applied electric fields, especially with the counter-rotating fields they'd set up. But importantly, the source does not believe it's anti-gravity in the usual sense, or even a radiation effect. Instead, they align quite strongly with Kozyrev's view, that mercury has this unique ability to interact with the active qualities of time, and they believe this interaction can, in fact, become mechanistic, meaning it can be harnessed or observed to produce measurable physical effects, like the ones they witness.
Okay, this is a really profound distinction they're making. And it leads to, well, a truly fundamental question that our source touches upon. It challenges the very nature of gravity itself. This is a really radical rethinking of physics.
It absolutely is. Our source states this quite explicitly. In their model of universe, gravity, as we typically conceive it, does not exist. They view it as a concept that really only exists from what they term an atheistic Einsteinian view of things, where gravity is treated as a fundamental force, but without a deeper explanation perhaps for why it exists or how it arises. They argue that scientists, quote, can't reconcile it because it doesn't exist as an independent force within their particular framework. They describe it instead as just a concept, not a reality.
So what is gravity then, in their view, if it's not an fundamental force?
In their perspective, what we perceive and measure as gravity is actually a manifestation of these other dynamic interactions. Interactions of matter, particularly specific elements like mercury with these active qualities of time, or perhaps other fundamental forces or fields that haven't been fully understood or properly measured by conventional physics yet. Essentially, they see gravity as maybe a placeholder concept, a label we put on phenomena that are truly driven by these deeper, less understood interactions within the very fabric of reality itself. Yeah. It's a fundamental challenge to conventional physics, no doubt about it, and it's rooted directly in their own experimental observations and their agreement with Kozyrev's unconventional work. It really asks us to re-examine some of our most basic assumptions about how the universe works.
Wow, okay. That's a truly radical perspective, and is a really crucial distinction for us to make here, too. Our purpose in this deep dive is simply to convey the ideas present in the source material we've looked at to allow you, the listener, to consider these different viewpoints, these different models of the universe. We're not endorsing any particular scientific theory here, but rather trying to understand the landscape of thought around these, frankly, remarkable phenomena. What a journey we've been on, though. Seriously. From a viral tweet about AI making a supposed discovery, to a deep dive into the true and often misunderstood nature of machine learning, and then winding back through history to the pioneering work of Nikola Tesla, the intriguing theories of Kozyrev, and finally culminating in that really personal, explosive experiment with spinning Mercury. It's been quite the ride through science, fact, theory, and, well, maybe something else entirely.
It really has. And I think the key takeaway here for you, the learner, is the absolute importance of critical thinking, always. When you're faced with extraordinary claims, especially ones that get amplified by things like artificial intelligence, it's just vital to question the source, right? To try and understand how that information is truly generated, and to consider the long, often complex history of scientific inquiry that frequently predates what might look like a brand new modern discovery. The peculiar properties of Mercury, while clearly challenging to harness and fully understand, they definitely seem to hold some powerful, intriguing secrets. Secrets that continue to elude easy categorization and, yeah, might even challenge our fundamental understanding of reality itself.
Absolutely. And this whole exploration of spinning Mercury and its potential interaction with the fundamental fabric of reality, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other accepted scientific concepts might be ripe for re-examination, especially if we look at them through a different lens, or perhaps as our source did, with maybe nothing more than some microwire and a simple hand-crank generator. The universe might just be far stranger and more interconnected than we currently imagine.